positive motivation, bodhicitta motivation, and generating a mind of refuge. Yeah, so sit comfortably, collect your attention inwards, visualize yourself surrounded by all sentient beings, with your mother and father to either side of you, and then your other dear family and friends, and all strangers, and even antagonists or those whom we're most prone to become angry with, sitting directly in front of us. And try to generate loving kindness and compassion equally towards all of them, all sentient beings and oneself included. And within that, generate motivation for this session on, what's the topic?
The
The
purpose
meaning
of
of
the life.
life, the
Yeah.
purpose of life, yeah.
The meaning of life, yes.
So generate a positive motivation for reflecting on, discussing the purpose of life. And then if you like, try to generate the mind of refuge, visualizing the field of refuge in the space before you. Yeah, objects representing the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. We're one nature with your own guru. Okay, so then we can begin. Yeah, meaning of life. Is that, yeah, okay. What's the meaning of life? The meaning of life is, that's a fill in the blank question. Yeah, actually, I was thinking, oftentimes we do kind of find it presented that way, like, especially, I don't know, especially in FPMT, I guess you can say, in sadhanas, many of the short sadhanas, there's like a motivation for doing the sadhana. But I don't know, myself, I always found that a little, and it's not just the FPMT thing, also like, especially in the Jorcho, I'm not sure how to say Jorcho. Usually we just call it Jorcho, but it's like a preliminary practice in Tibetan. Also in that practice in Tibetan, there is a extensive motivation at the beginning, and then, a motivation for why to study a text. Some texts, it'll, explain the reason why it's beneficial to study that text, and that's kind of serves as a motivation. Yeah, and then in Tibetan and sadhanas also to have, state, words that one is supposed to generate that attitude oneself of the reason you're doing that practice. But it's a little problematic in all those cases because, well, is that actually what we think or not? No. So the words are there because it's kind of a suggestion that, this is how you, or an instruction, this is how you should think. And this is what your motivation should be, the motivation you should generate for doing a practice. So how does that relate to the meaning of life? Well, what is the meaning of life? It's kind of like, why we live, why we do things. So it is related to a motivation. Why do we get up in the morning? Why do we do anything instead of just not doing anything at all? What is the purpose of all the stuff that we do? So there's a lot of questions related to that, but it is related to our motivation. Like what motivates us? What is our intention? What's our goal? What are we striving for? What's our aim? So so there's a lot of discussion about this in the Buddhist practice, in the Buddhist world. You can say, I mean, in a way, all of the Buddhist teachings are related to a meaning in life. And then yeah, we'll come back to that. But I think I guess my main point here is kind of going all over the place, but is that whatever, we can't just, it's like someone can't give, if we ask the fill in the blank question, well, the meaning of the life is, someone can't just tell us that and that becomes the meaning of life for us. No, we have to find it ourselves, right? What we feel is most important, what's our most highest aim, long-term goal. It's something we all have to discover for ourselves. It's not something we can just read in a book and it says, oh, so in this session, as the person speaking for half the time, I can't just tell you like, this is the meaning of life. And then you just walk away and, oh yeah, okay, that's what he said. So I guess that's the meaning of life for me. It's not really like, and we can't just read in the sadhana, oh, this is why I'm doing that. Although, I mean, it's good to, yeah, read about different suggestions for what might be the reason for us doing a meditation practice, what might be the reason for us to do anything. And we can, because it helps to deepen our own reflection and then deepen our own understanding and yeah, kind of awaken our mind to new ways of thinking about what is meaningful in life. So we do need that, but we also need to do the work of thinking about it ourselves and coming to our own conclusions. So I think, when I was thinking about what is the meaning of life, I think each of us probably, we can just look at our own lives and see how, it's like maturing as a person in life is sort of in a way, it's a story of the development of what we feel is most meaningful in life, right? So I think about when we all start off as young children, infants, and then children. So for a really young child, like what's the meaning of life? It's completely different than it is for an adult. It's much more straightforward. It's survival, basically. As a young child, due to our instincts, if we don't have life, then a meaning of life doesn't make any sense. So the meaning of life at the very beginning of our lives, and for as a child, we don't really conceptualize very much. We don't think about things in a very complex way. So we're a lot like animals. So it's the same for animals. At the very beginning, kind of the meaning of life is just to survive, just to stay alive. So as human children, then that means that because we're totally reliant upon our parents. So it's kind of like, and you can see this very clearly in 2, 3, 4-year-olds, is that it's kind of like the main meaning of life is having the what do you say, the attention and the care and the affection, nurturing, and the kind of commitment of our parents. We need that bond with our parents, because it's not like children think, oh, in order to survive, I need my parents to like take care of me. But the instinct is there, no? That, I need the attention, and you see children competing for attention a lot. When they're not getting attention of their parents, it's very stressful. It's traumatizing, for children, young children, not to feel that their parents are concerned about them is probably the most traumatic thing maybe they can experience. There's very good, you can see, probably you see this in your own experience, but there's interesting studies where, I don't know, interesting, but very, eye-opening studies where, with infants, a parent is sitting in front of an infant, playing with them, talking to them, and then the researchers will have the parent just like put on a stone face, just like not react anymore. And the children, within a minute, they're like crying and bawling. They're completely traumatized. It's quite cruel kind of. It's a little bit cruel. It's not a comfortable thing to watch, but it makes this point that for children, they need that affection and concern and attention of their parents. So that's the meaning of life for them? The meaning of life, I think, is kind of just like staying alive, survival, but it's involved with that connection with the parents. So I think that sense of a need for connection with other people stays with us through all of our lives. as we mature as children, then, of course, the relationship with our parents changes. But especially when we become adolescents and young adults, I think it's that same kind of need for connection and with other people. It shifts onto, friends later, and then, maybe a partner later on, and then later on, if we have children, it shifts to our own children. The need for connection with as a parent with the children. So I think kind of to jump forward a little bit is I know, like, I mean, I've never been a parent, but I know from hearing from my own parents and from my sister and other friends, when they become a parent, then very quickly most meaningful thing in life becomes their children. Taking care of one's children, raising one's children, nurturing one's children, um, which is a very beautiful thing. But then just to skip back a little bit, so for children, maybe most meaningful thing in life is this bond with their parents. And then as they grow up, I mean, as they get a little older, I mean, I remember being an adolescent and feeling like, well, more meaningful to me than my bond with my parents was bond with friends. And as adolescent, a big thing for, you is to become one of maybe most meaningful thing you can think is like, in 7th, 8th grade, high school, is approval from your peers. It's a very important thing. People don't feel approved by their peers, then it's also very traumatic, can lead to depression, great sadness, and be very kind of miserable. So that, but that's one way I think this development of our sense of meaning in life grows. But then as we get, become a young adult more, especially, well, it depends. I mean, different people are different, right? But I guess you could think, some people, they stay sort of stuck in that mentality of an adolescent through their whole life, where there's, I mean, a lot of people, I think, where they feel like the most meaningful thing in life is gaining approval from peers. And then that leads into the whole rat race of consumerism, of getting a job that people respect, having enough money, you can buy a house and a car, and it can lead to that, where for some people, most meaningful thing in life is just well, maybe not not many people, I don't think, but for some people, meaning of life is kind of I don't know, in a way, keeping up with the Joneses, or doing what society expects you to do, in short, and having a good reputation and things. And then, but I think that's maybe a small number of people. For more people, I think most meaningful thing in life, you hear people say, is, their family, their connections they have with their loved ones and their family. And that can lead you to be a very good person. I think for most people, that leads them to be a very good person, wanting to be the best the best husband, the best wife, the best mother, the best father, the best children to their parents, the best brother, sister that they can be. That that's a very powerful motivating force to to be a responsible, kind, loving person. But it's not Dharma, right? So we're talking about in the Buddhist context. But why isn't it Dharma? Because it's not a motivation that necessarily, well, in one way it is Dharma, right? In another way it's not. There's two different ways of kind of defining if something is Dharma or not. So when I say, that kind of motivation to be a good person in order to be, a good husband, wife, parent, sibling, child, and so forth, is not Dharma, is because it's a motivation that's just contained within this life, right? For most people, it doesn't extend beyond this life. So there's one way of defining Dharma where anything you do motivated by just the happiness of this life is worldly and therefore not Dharma. Whereas something you do that's motivated by um, the aspiration to achieve a state of well-being that transcends this life is Dharma. So in that way, this kind of the most meaningful thing in one's life being, the maintaining these wholesome relationships, loving relationships with family. In that way, it's not Dharma. But another way, maybe a way I kind of prefer, anything that goes against the afflictive emotions is Dharma. Anything that is motivated by or increases the afflictive emotions is not Dharma, right? So it's whether something goes against, is an antidote, reduces afflictive emotions, or whether it increases afflictive emotions, right? The former, something that reduces, disturbing states of mind, attachment, anger, jealousy, arrogant pride, and so forth, is not Dharma. And then something that reduces, reduces selfishness, like altruistic attitude, that reduces anger, like patience, is Dharma, right? So it's not related necessarily to the motivation being confined to this life or not. It's a different way to look at it. So in that way, the most meaningful thing in life is, being a good parent, being a good spouse, being a good child of one's parents, and so forth. It can go both ways. Probably sometimes those things increase attachment and lead to anger. But other times, in better moments, they very much help one to generate forgiveness and tolerance, and selflessness and so forth. It can go both ways, right? So this is all, general kind of talk about how we find meaning in life. Yeah, I know in my own personal experience, I think as a young adult, after college, at one point a few years after graduating from college, I became really, really sick, kind of bedridden for several months, in a lot of pain and very weak. And at that time, I really, my parents were looking after me and received a lot of messages from family and friends. And at that time, I really realized like how much I depend upon other people, like how much other people and knowing that other people are caring about me and so forth is really important. It's almost like, essential to life. So that experience for me being really, really kind of weak and helpless and seeing how much I depend upon other people, it helped me see a lot how, in one way, the most meaningful thing in life is actually repaying the kindness of others. We receive so much from others, in different ways, as a friend, as a child, as a student, as a neighbor, that we really have a responsibility to do something worthwhile with our life in such a way that we give something back to others, either directly to those who have directly helped us or just in general to the world, right? So that's one very, I think, very kind of tangible way that, we find meaning in life is basically through gratitude, by reflecting what are the good things that we have, that we enjoy, where does it come from? And then seeing that, it would be meaningful, our life would be meaningful if we could do something to repay that kindness. Yeah, so maybe I should say something in a more kind of typical Buddhist way, which is related here, maybe ties in well. So in a Buddhist way, I mean, one thing I think I really liked about Buddhism so much was, when I first sort of encountered it, was it takes these kind of ordinary ways of, how generating a sense of what's meaningful in life, and then it combines it with a very kind of clear and deep like philosophical way of thinking about things, which deepens those ordinary ways we find meaning in life. So, for example, take dependent arising. I mean, the main Buddhist view of the world, the main way of analyzing what exists and why things happen in the world is by looking at dependent arising. So, yeah. So if we just look at what we are as a person, we're completely dependent upon others. So, looking at that from, all the physical stuff that makes up our body, it all comes from four elements: earth, water, air, fire. It comes from the inanimate universe. All the thoughts, the feelings, experiences that we have, the language that we use, and then all the possessions, all the things we enjoy, all the our very life comes from our parents. So if we look at dependent arising and how we as a person are dependently arisen phenomena in many different ways, it's a more philosophical way to look at it, but it's similar to what a kind of natural way of understanding we have about ourselves, but deepens it. So that recognizing how we're a dependent arising then also deepens this sense that it's not right to just use our life in a selfish way, seeking merely our own, chasing our own wants and desires. And if our highest aim is just kind of to get what I want in this life, how incredibly shallow and limited, kind of tragic that is, and how much, looking at how we are dependently arising phenomena, how our life is so intricately interrelated with the lives of countless others and with the inanimate environment. And thereby, when we harm others, we're actually harming ourselves. When we harm our environment, when we pollute the water, pollute the air, pollute the land, we're actually harming ourselves. So looking and generating that view of interdependent arising, how we're related to others, a family, a friends, strangers, even enemies, and how we're related to the inanimate environment, how we're related to other animals, then that naturally leads to a very a deeper sense of the meaning. The meaning of our life is to do something to bring about the well-being of all. To bring about the well-being of ourselves through bringing about the well-being of others, right? So that really, well, that, I mean, like, ultimately, it's kind of the meaning of life is to bring about our own well-being, right? Our happiness in all the different permutations that has. But then the big question is, and that's kind of a universal thing, but the big question is, well, how to do that, right? So this view of dependent arising, which is really emphasized, especially in the, what do you say, the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism, by having this view of dependent arising, it leads naturally to an altruistic attitude, and a sort of view that we should use our life to benefit all creatures, all living creatures, and the inanimate environment upon which they depend. Whereas, so let's just switch back to like the Pali tradition of Buddhism. It's a little different. And I mean, and looking at that can lead us into sort of a different angle of the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism and the way idea of meaning of life is kind of generated. But in the Pali Sutras, the Buddha was teaching more for people who didn't have so easily have the capacity to have this all-encompassing, view that I need to use my life to benefit all sentient beings, and for that reason I need to become a fully enlightened Buddha, right? So for many people, that's just too big, it's too vast, it's too difficult. So for some people who they need like, a step in between just our ordinary view of what we are and what's meaningful and this incredible vast view of the Sanskrit or the Bodhisattva tradition. And the Buddha taught in the Pali Sutras, the Buddha taught more like how to escape suffering, right? Because, and that, well, a state of peace, a state of perfect peace, as an individual, a state of perfect peace is possible, a state of freedom from any form of suffering. And because that's possible, because all of suffering arises and depends upon causes and conditions, and the main cause of all suffering is a sort of misconception about the way we exist, misconception about the way, about mainly the way we as a person exist. So we reify or we falsely grasp at a permanent, a partless, unitary kind of soul or self, and then we become obsessed with we become obsessed with serving that sort of self, which actually doesn't exist at all, that kind of self, and we become attached to things that we deem as pleasurable and want them, and then averse to things we deem as unpleasurable, get angry at them, and then all the other afflictive emotions and all the negative karma and all suffering arises from that. And primarily we harm others. I mean, that's the reason that we harm others, is because we feel like there's this certain kind of self that we have, and that's more important to me than anyone else. So others don't matter, and if I harm others, I'm justified because I'm me and they're not me, something like that. So, so the Buddha taught in the Pali Sutras that, the sort of temporary way to reduce suffering is abandon harming others, right? By abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions. So we stop harming others. And the purpose of that is to stop creating the cause of suffering for ourselves, because it's when we harm others that we create the suffering, the causes of suffering for ourselves. We create our own suffering by harming others, essentially. And then more deeply, so the first thing the Buddha taught, in many of the Pali Sutras, is just stop harming others and practice instead the morality, pure morality of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions. And then in a deeper way, the Buddha taught, the Four Noble Truths. The truth that suffering exists, it arises from causes, but it's possible to eliminate those causes completely from the root, thereby achieve the cessation of suffering. And then there's a path of practice to do that. So the initial part of the path is, practice pure morality, and then based on leading a moral life, not harming others, we generate some peace in the mind. On the basis of that, we're able to generate good concentration, mental concentration, clear mental focus. And then on the basis of that, we're able to see deeply the truth of how we exist, and that we're dependently arising phenomena, we're impermanent and changing moment to moment. And then actually, when we search for this is something essential about, essential person, a permanent, solitary, unitary person, there is no such thing. And so deeply looking at that, it releases us from this obsessive concern with myself at the exclusion of others, right? And so it releases us from attachment, it releases us from anger, releases us from arrogant pride and jealousy and so forth. And we can generate an incredible peaceful state of mind, and also be free from karma, and then be free from death and birth through the force of karma. So then in the Pali Sutras, the supreme kind of meaning of life is to achieve this incredible state of peace that's possible. So that's something far beyond what most ordinary people ever think of, right, as what's most meaningful in life. But that's just halfway, or not even. This is the initial step of, the in the Sanskrit sutras. The Buddha taught, well, not only is it possible to achieve this state of everlasting, perfect peace, but we can achieve something far beyond that, where we can purify every obscuration there is to knowing, and then our ability to know can expand infinitely. such that we know everything. And also our ability to love, our ability to care about others, our ability to have energy and energetically work for the welfare of others. All of these positive qualities can be expanded infinitely. In addition to eliminating all the garbage, right? All the negative karma and afflictive emotions, we can expand positive qualities infinitely. And the main purpose, the main method to do that is just to generate concern for others, right? And broaden our scope of our concern more and more and more. And also to recognize that we have that potential, right? If we don't recognize we have that potential, then we're not really effective at cultivating it. So that's why in the Sanskrit sutras, the Buddha taught that, all sentient beings have the potential for full enlightenment. And so the most meaningful thing we can do, the most meaningful thing we can aim for in life is to develop our full potential in order to be of the greatest possible benefit to others, to all sentient beings, right? So that's this bodhicitta attitude, the bodhisattva ideal. And that's, I think you can say that's what the Buddha taught as kind of the highest, the most profound or meaningful thing in life. But so back to what I originally started saying, so many of us, we aspire to have that ideal. We recite, words generating bodhicitta every day, but we have to check for ourselves whether that's authentically, do we really think we can become enlightened or not? Is that really possible for anyone, not to mention oneself? So, and then, and what is enlightenment? What is a Buddha? Also, what does that really mean? And is that really something I'm actually concerned with? Like when I'm standing in the line in the grocery store, isn't just buying groceries more meaningful? Or when I'm I really want to be with someone, or I really want to achieve something, or I really want to go someplace, then we kind of become more realistic about how deep this bodhicitta, this ideal is. So we do have to check again and again, like, what am I really primarily concerned about? What is really most meaningful to me? And not just kind of repeat nice words and think that's kind of actually how we feel. Yeah. Okay. So half the time is gone. So I'd be happy to hear what questions or comments you all have now.
Venerable, thank you for that. Sorry, just to ask you more on this. What if we check and we find like a genuine motivation is not really bodhicitta? What I'm surviving for is maybe more money or a bigger house or something. What do you do when you find that out? What's the next step?
Well, then I think the next step is to see, are you satisfied with that or not? No. Is that really the person you want to be, and or not in the long term? And that way, it is very helpful to think about death. To think about our death. That eventually we're going to die. And I think it's commonly thought in society, and you read in especially accounts of people who have near-death experiences, that we, naturally when we die, we look back at our whole life and kind of review the things we did in our life. And so it's helpful to think about our death and imagine looking back at our life and seeing, well, what are we going to be, if our motivation is really this or that, is that, and that was really the driving force, the shaping force for all the different choices we make in life each day, how we use each day, how we approach each relationship, how we spend our time month to month, year to year. That will the choices we make, will the ones when we look back at the end of our life that we'll be satisfied with or not? So I think when we see ourselves kind of that in our minds, more mundane things like just money or a reputation or just kind of hedonistic pleasures and so forth, that those do really easily take precedence, do really become dominant in one moment, much more than, you know, our ideal kind of idealistic ideals of, you know, bodhicitta or renunciation or whatever. Then yeah, then we have to kind of take a serious look at and think, was that really the person I want to be? What kind of person do I really want to be? Yeah.
Thank you, Venerable.
Bilstad, what do you think about all this? You haven't asked a question in the last, we've had this the third session now. You haven't asked one question so far. You have any question? I'll put you on the spot. Anyway, it's good to see you're here. I hope you're well. All right, Anne, Mary Ellen, you're the other ones with your cameras on.
Actually, I just have an observation because I worked for many years in hospice, and there's a lot of talk about what do you regret at the time of death? What are the most common regrets at the time of death? And I also listened to a lecture yesterday by Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo, and she was talking about the Bodhisattva vows. And the 5 biggest regrets at the time of death are, I pulled them up. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not what others expect of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. And I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. I wish that I had let myself be happier. And while I was listening to the lecture on the Bodhisattva vow, that was kind of presented in the, you know, like the progression of scopes, of the scopes. So the initial scope is just to, you know, find a better neighborhood in samsara, and then the progression on that. And I think of those regrets, and it hasn't been my experience that those have been the biggest regrets of the people that I've been with as they were dying. But when I look at that list, that, you know, my N is smaller than whoever wrote this list. They're all kind of initial scope. So how do you find a way to help people turn their mind a little bit farther from just, you know, I wish that I had had a better neighborhood in samsara kind of thought process.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what did you find people regret most in your experience in hospice work?
Initially that they had not wasted time. Yeah, not wasted time. So I guess the people that I met with had were not so into regret. And the ones that were into regret are just like boldly difficult death processes.
Right.
So, but yeah, I wish I had more time. It wasn't ever any, you know, just, it's not really a question. It's just kind of a thought about.
Well, at first you said, I wish I hadn't wasted so much time, I think.
Yeah,
but I think
actually,
it's natural. I mean, because then there's a sense, well, that there was something you wish you'd done that you hadn't, and that you wasted time not doing that thing you've done. But that, I mean, that relates to the list you mentioned. The list, like, yeah, I think a lot of people maybe regret not having spent more time with their children or with their spouse or their family because they work too much, because they're more too concerned about, you know, money and not recognizing how much more valuable the time with the family is. But it's true, yeah, the most of those, they're kind of a little bit small scope.
not
No,
disrespecting, not
no,
disrespecting the initial scope either. It's just that,
no.
you know,
Well, I'm not even sure they're even small scope, because they're even, even small scope. Well, yeah, there's I mean, the motivation to achieve a good rebirth, right? So most people don't, if you don't believe in rebirth, then you're not even going to do that, right?
yeah.
So that's where, I mean, the basic Buddhist view is very different from most ordinary people's view, because rebirth is just taken for granted, like that existence doesn't end at death, that we, there's a state of existence after death, and we need to be more concerned about that than we do need to be about the state of affairs in this life,
Mhm.
right? But I think there can be a kind of misconception that people have, that I know I've struggled with it, is like, well, does that mean you should not care about your family and your friends in this life? Because you're just going to be separated from them when you die. So if you care about, your friends and family a lot, isn't that kind of like meaning you're, whatever you do then is not Dharma, that's motivated by caring about friends, because it's just attachment to things of this life, right? It can look like that, right?
But there's just confusion over the difference between attachment and love. And love is, in our present state, always mixed with attachment, but it has some beautiful aspects as well.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, real pure love is an antidote to afflictive emotions. Yeah, and not, but it's true, was mixed with attachment. But yeah, it's true, it's confusion, but it can lead to that kind of doubt, that confusion. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. Yeah, Anne.
Couldn't we consider the people in our lives as relationships within which we cultivate qualities within ourselves? So, when we were 2, our mother or father might be, we're seeking their attention. And then when we're 13 or 14, we want to cultivate respect, or at least they want us to cultivate respect and humility. And then when we're 30 or 40, we may cultivate different qualities with these objects. I mean, I'm not, just in reference to family members. I was having this kind of discussion with my teacher, my first teacher, like our relationships will change, and we need to guard our minds, and we'll come into each other's lives, and we'll part. And, we may find each other again as family or not. And just thinking of, like dependent arising, like thinking of, okay, what action do I want to take now so that my relationship with them in 10 lifetimes and 20 lifetimes, how that will cultivate, or yeah, if I want certain things my way, just thinking, okay, well, I wish for them to attain enlightenment, then
Yeah.
it helps, it's just that question, that openness to saying, I guess it's a kind of motivation thing, because I was thinking of this also with relationship to talking about the distinctions between different lineages, and I was like, well, maybe if we just super duper rejoice for, Aman, you were mentioning last week that you have friends who are exploring Theravada Buddhism, and then you guys can get into debates and like, well, I think my thought of my religion, but like, maybe I was like, well, maybe if our motivation is to just rejoice for each other for having found the spiritual path and having found some way of mental development, then maybe that's a very good protection from sliding into this place of disparaging the Buddhist teachings, you know, because then it protects us perhaps from ego, you know, like, oh, my ideas and my beliefs are so special and better than the other person's. So maybe if we rejoice for them, I don't know, you know.
That's true. In the Jataka tales, you see the Buddha speak a lot about his relationships with people from long ago. No, so like his mother and father and Shariputra, Moggallana, all his main students, and you see that, you know, it does show how the relationships we have and the things, the way we engage with others in one life, it leads to, you know, different. So if we have hostile relationship and antagonistic relationship in one life, it'll lead to the same in a future life. If we have very positive relationship with people where we support each other in, you know, being a good person and virtuous practices and so forth, then that we continue that kind of pattern in a relationship with that person in future lives. So in that way, yeah, it is. It's not that you know, our relationships with our friends and family are not important because we're striving for happiness in future lives. But just like our happiness in this life depends upon others, our happiness in future lives depends upon others. And just like our happiness in one life depends upon others, our being liberated from samsara depends upon others, depends upon having good relationships with others, right? And not to mention enlightenment. So actually, you know, that the motivation to achieve, you know, well-being for just ourselves in future lives, it should make us more, you know, strengthen our sense of the importance of being a good friend, being a good parent, you know, of cherishing and nurturing the relationships with other people in this life. But just the way of thinking is not just limited to just this life. No, it's extending beyond this life. And same with liberation from samsara enlightenment. If we think about it the correct way, it should deepen all those relationships. Yeah. Yeah, I had a friend recently was saying, we were talking about the 4 immeasurable thoughts, and they were saying, oh, in equanimity, immeasurable equanimity, they thought it meant that, you know, we should generate a state where we're not, well, I mean, where we're not attached to or averse to anyone, because you know, may all sentient beings abide in a state of equanimity. Let's see. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings abide in a state of equanimity. What is it? I can't think of the words now.
Free from attachment.
To holding some close and others distant, isn't it? Holding some close and others distant, usually how it's translated. A state of equanimity where we're holding close, not holding, a state of equanimity free from holding some close and others distant. So yeah, the person thought, well, that means we shouldn't hold anyone close. And I was debating, I don't think that's what it means, right? It means you shouldn't hold people in an unequal way, where you hold some more dear and others than others. Because if you look at like so as my reasoning I was using, you look at the 7-fold cause and effect method for generating bodhicitta, you're supposed to hold all sentient beings close, right? Remembering that they were kind to you as your mother, right? So you try to generate this affectionate, you know, concern for all sentient beings and feel that they're very dear to you. And then in other places, you said you should hold all sentient beings as dear as if, you know, as if they were your only child. So just the way a mother would be concerned about her only child, right? You should have that kind of concern for all sentient beings. So I think that makes more sense, you know, in the measurable equanimity. That it's not that you don't hold anyone close and you don't hold anyone distant, and therefore you just have a neutral attitude towards everyone. That's quite cold, right? It's rather that you don't have an unequal sense of concern. You have an equal sense of concern for everyone. Well, that's another one that's kind of easy to be confused about. Yeah, I don't know. What did you have in mind when you wrote this topic on meaning of life? What's the meaning of life?
I always, I always went back to, whenever I see His Holiness's lectures or anyone lectures, and they always start, the meaning of a life seems to be this pursuit of happiness, that we all want to be happy. This is common with all of us. But and I read like the Bodhi Charyavatara, and I read all of that where he says that this very pursuit to be happy makes us miserable. So I understand like how you differentiate these things, but it's also something that's confused me for a long time. And I wanted to ask you that, I guess, like, what is His Holiness saying and what is Shanti Deva saying? Like,
Yeah, yeah, it's confusing. I agree. It can be very confusing. Yeah. Well, I think His Holiness is is saying, yeah, that naturally we all want to be happy. I mean, he'll point to give the example of even small insects or microorganisms.
yeah,
They are attracted to. They go towards what they perceive as something that will nourish and sustain their life, and if what they perceive as something that's a threat to their life that will harm them, they go away from. So we all have that natural instinct that we're attracted to. We cherish things that we perceive that will sustain, nourish, support us, and things that we perceive that will harm us. We're averse to and we want to get away from, and that's kind of why we feel happiness and suffering, right? When we get things that we feel somehow contribute to our well-being, we feel happy, and when we encounter things that we feel in some way they harm our well-being, then we feel suffering. And that all creatures have that instinct, and that's really the basis for then moral behavior, how we should treat others. We should treat others always in a way that is and they will perceive as contributing to their welfare. And we shouldn't harm others. We shouldn't treat people in a way that they feel is going to destroy and threaten their welfare, their life, and their flourishing. But then, yeah, the problem becomes when we're not concerned about others, we're exclusively concerned about ourselves and our own happiness and what we want, what I want, at the exclusion of caring about anybody else. And that can lead us into justifying harming others because someone's doing something we don't want without thinking about how our actions are going to affect them. We just do something to make them stop, right? Stop doing what we don't want, and that harms them. So that's where, that's where just being exclusively concerned about our own happiness in the midst of the blindness to the way we're interconnected with and interrelated with others, that leads to big problems. Right? But if we're concerned about our own well-being and happiness within the wisdom of recognizing how we're intimately interconnected with others and the well-being of others, then it leads to very positive actions. Yeah. And
I'm curious. I was talking with my mom the other day about, and it kind of ties in with everything we're talking about. And Mary Ellen, you talking about, regrets at the end of life. And I was saying to her about, I feel like people at the end of life kind of get a very different perspective of time and space and self and other. There's kind of, like contemplating death and impermanence, it helps us imagine the world without us, without self, and imagine the world without the other. And, you can appreciate this kind of ephemeral beauty of change and everything. And I was thinking, like, all the faiths seem to have a perspective that upon death, there's kind of this, meta awareness beyond introspection, right? Like you can see your whole life pass before you. And I was like, is it then I mean, when we're in this world that we are lost in sense perceptions, that things are so solid, and we get all tied up into what's best for me versus what's best for others. And like, yeah, like this, like, I guess I was saying to her, I think when people die is when they get really smart. And that's kind of the sad thing, is that's when there's maybe the greatest wish for change and transformation, is kind of when you have that life review upon death. And I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Many people, a near-death experience kind of totally changes their life. Brush with death, or the death of a someone close to them, because it does help you get this much broader perspective, on life. And I mean, it does. That's why the Buddha described meditation on death as like following the tracks of an elephant in the forest. It's the easiest. It's the easiest. Yeah, the Buddha said if you're making your way through a forest, the easiest tracks to follow are the tracks of an elephant. So like that, if you're trying to understand like what Dharma is, what Dharma practice is, meditation on death is the easiest way, for the very reason you're pointing out. It helps you get this much bigger perspective, and helps you see what's meaningful and what's not. The Stoics also talked about that in Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. Many of the meditations are about reflecting on one's demise, one's mortality, one's death. And then other ones are quite a few other ones are like talking about having this like almost like a view of the earth from outer space. Of course, he doesn't use quite that terminology, but this kind of the overview effect. Imagine how in the vast expanse of the universe, how infinitesimally small Earth, and then within Earth our own life is. I think we get a similar sense of that at death. It's true. But I think it's true what you say, because a lot of our sense of self comes through the way we experience the world, through being embodied in this body, through being in this body. Like, why do we have a sense that, I'm more important than others? Most of us, we have that. Like, my primary concern is with me, I need to look out for me. No one else is. So why do we have that? A lot of it is to do with, because we experience the world from behind these eyes, from within these ears. And so, and we don't, and also within this mind, we experience this continuum of thoughts and feelings and experiences. From within this mental continuum, we don't have that same perspective on the, of others. But that's why a lot of the Bodhicharyavatara is about, like, we can use our reason and logic to understand that others have the same kind of experience, just from within a different body and within a different mental continuum. But their right to well-being and happiness, their concern for those things is no less important than mine. And why should I be more concerned about this body than the body of another? Just because I'm, experience it from the way I do, it's not really a valid reason. Why should I be concerned about this continuum of experiences I have versus those of another, just because I experience them in this first person way as opposed to a second or third person way? Is that really a valid reason? Like, why I should be concerned more about one or the other? But that's why the meditation of exchanging self and others, it's really about this, letting go of this, fixation with, this way of experiencing the world from within this kind of body and continuum, and thereby neglecting others because I don't experience the world from their perspective. So letting go of that and really trying to imagine, well, what if I did? What if I experienced the whole world from within, the bodies of the 7 billion other people on Earth, and from within the mental continuums of others? I can imagine that. Then my perspective would be completely different, right? And my sense of concern would be completely different. Yeah. So, yeah, what's the meaning of life? The question is yours to answer. But I think we've had a good discussion. So I hope we all can walk away with some new ways to think about the question. I know I certainly can. So thank you all. And let's dedicate briefly by thinking. I think it's not a question enough. I think it's a question that deserves more of our time and attention. Us and other people. I think many people would do well to think more about what's most meaningful in life before someone dies, before they're facing death themselves. So let's dedicate. Think of all the merit we've created, all the merit created by other sentient beings, all the merit created by countless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and our own spiritual teachers. And rejoice. So by the force of this merit, may all sentient beings be free from every form of suffering. Those that are alive, those who have recently passed away, those who've taken rebirth in the lower realms, especially. And may they have all sentient beings, may they have every form of well-being and happiness up to full enlightenment as quickly as possible. And for these purposes, may us and other sentient beings reflect again and again and more deeply on what is most meaningful in life. What's the meaning of life? So the more deeply we see into that question, may that inform and guide all of our actions, such that they're meaningful, that they contribute to the well-being of ourselves and others, and to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. And then may His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and other teachers have long and stable lives, and all spiritual traditions that benefit sentient beings, may they flourish, especially may Choe Khor Sum Ling Center in Bangalore continue to flourish and be able to offer boundless programs and opportunities, retreat opportunities, and so forth to sentient beings in Bangalore and throughout the world. And may Choe Khor Sum Ling and then all the other FPMT centers and so forth have all the conducive conditions they need, volunteers, sponsorship, and so forth, to be able to flourish and continue offering some goodness in the world. Okay, thank you all, and hope you have a good week. When we meet again, then.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Venerable.
Venerable.